All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Wang. I'm CEO of Longhorn Financial, where our goal is to help families lower the cost of college, maximize aid, figure out how to pay for college while all doing so that you don't have to live under a bridge in retirement. I'm really excited today. We have a special guest. You may see on your screen there, Peter Wyatt, who is the Senior Associate Director of Student Financial Services at Johns Hopkins University. Just as for logistics, before I get to Peter and Peter's background, all of you have been put on mute. And if you have a question, if you mouse around on your screen, or if you're on a mobile device, you could actually touch the your screen and some icons will pop up and you should have the ability to chat in. And so if you have a question, and we are here to answer your questions, but you can chat in your question and then Peter and or I can answer them, okay? So I encourage questions. All right, so let me just go ahead and get set up here. Just give me 1 second. Okay, all right. So I'd like to introduce Peter Wyatt, Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid at Student Financial Services. I'm sorry, Peter, at Johns Hopkins University. Just before I get into his bio, just so you understand, Peter and I go back many years. We used to play baseball together, and he's a pretty good shortstop, and I think he's got a pretty good either curve or slider. I can't remember what he used to throw. Yeah. But now he's at Johns Hopkins. Yeah. Or whatever it was, it got people out. Yeah. So, yeah. But I just want to share a little background on Peter so that everybody has a little information on you. So he has over 15 years of experience working in the financial aid industry. Like I said, he is currently the Senior Associate Director at Johns Hopkins, but in the past, he's also worked for institutions such as Oberlin College in Ohio, Wellesley College, and MIT. He's given numerous talks and presentations to large groups regarding a variety of financial aid topics, which I believe also, I think you used to present at Lowell High, if I remember right. I think for their
MIFA. Through MIFA, yeah.
Yeah, through MIFA. And so he's also presenting on filling out the various financial aid forms, the FAFSA and the profile form, and also understand negotiating packages, because obviously that's what he does. He has a really unique background in that he's worked for 4 really highly selective colleges, which really gives him some expertise that not many other people have. Because of the schools he's worked at, he's familiar with all 3 financial aid formulas and how they differ. Federal methodology, which everybody knows as the FAFSA, institutional methodology, which is what schools use off the information off the profile form, and a third method that I don't talk about as much, but it's also driven off the profile form. It's called consensus methodology. And so it's 3 different formulas that do treat the numbers a little bit differently. He's absolutely committed to guiding students and families through the complex, and I mean complex, financial aid system, making sure that they can reach their maximum potential for financial aid. So Peter, welcome. I am thrilled to have you with us. It's great to see you, buddy.
Thank you.
Let me start off. So we have a couple of questions. And again, folks on the call, please chat in your questions as you have them. But let's start off simply with families who have already committed, okay? So we'll talk about families who haven't committed a little bit later. But families who have already committed, what are some of the questions that they should be asking about aid? Not necessarily appeals, we'll get to that a little bit later, but just about the aid package that they've committed to.
Yeah, well, thanks for the introduction. That was very nice. So the first thing I think any student or family would want to know when looking at their financial aid package from a school is what is the grant and scholarship, what is a loan, and what is work. Those are kind of the 3 main components of an award package. You got the grant, the loan, and the work. And they can come in different forms, and sometimes it's a little confusing as to which is which. I mean, usually it's pretty clear, but there are some occasions where something might be named a little oddly. And particularly, this might be useful to know the difference if it's a need-based grant or a merit-based scholarship, because that is important in terms of renewability. So if it's a need-based grant, does that mean it's going to be depending on your financial aid application next year, or are they going to keep that consistent? And that really depends on really the philosophy of the college. Sometimes they'll state that clearly in their policy and on their website. Other times it's not so clear. Merit scholarships will usually have some kind of a academic criteria that you have to maintain, maybe a 2.5 GPA, must be full-time. Could be different things just depending on the school, and that should be public information. But these are questions you want to make sure are clear as soon as you're looking at that award package. The next thing that I would say is very important to know is, what are you going to owe? At the end of the day, you have the cost of attendance, and that's the published information the college gives you, but that's not always directly going to match up with what your cost is going to be on the student account bill when you receive it. I say that because they're going to give you estimates for room and board, for example. Tuition should be accurate, tuition and fees, but room and board may depend on what dorm that you end up selecting. Could be a range of options there. So you want to see if the estimate they gave you actually matches up with what your real cost is going to be. Usually it's going to be close, but it might be farther up than you think it would be. So you want to confirm that. And then you want to look at what the indirect expenses are. So they'll say, we give you a certain allotment for books and supplies. This is what we think it's going to cost to travel based on wherever you are. So think about how those numbers match up to what your estimates are. And then do the math. Just see, okay, well, if they're going to bill me this, and I think I'm going to have these expenses, what am I going to owe after financial aid? And start with the grants and scholarships. And then that gives you basically your net price, your direct expenses less your grant or scholarship aid. And then decide, okay, do I need to borrow? How much work can the student do realistically? Is that going to be going toward the indirect expenses? So you kind of want to map all this out. And the sooner you can plan this out, the better off you're going to be once that first bill comes. And that's probably going to be, coming in July or August.
Okay, awesome. I know we'll talk about timeline in just a moment, but that's a great rundown of the bill. But I know before we started, you had also mentioned that sometimes there are charges that also appear on the bill that are beyond tuition, room, board fees, and books and stuff. Things like health insurance, right? So,
Yeah,
so
right.
just take a brief moment, just talk about some of the other charges that might show up on a bill, and can parents waive them or whatever.
Right. So the health insurance is the big one. So all colleges are required to make sure their students will be insured. So usually you will have a health insurance, if your student is already covered through your parent plan, family plan. Usually there will be a process for you to waive that, so you don't have to pay the health insurance that the school will charge you. If you don't waive it, though, it will automatically be charged to you. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that. And sometimes you have to take it. So if your health insurance is not comparable to the health insurance the student says they have to provide, you want to ask, okay, well, is that accounted for within the cost of attendance? Is there any form of financial aid that maybe will help cover that? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, but that's definitely one of those extra charges that can sneak up on you later. It's not always clearly advertised early on. And sometimes that's because the school doesn't know. Sometimes they get that information a bit later, and so they don't give it to you because they're not sure yet.
Awesome, thanks. Great information. So let me jump ahead a little bit. What about the families that have not yet committed, right? So they're looking at these letters, they're thinking about where their son or daughter is going to go. Again, we'll talk about appeals and stuff like that later, but what should the families be looking at for the ones who have not yet committed? Is it really different than what you just talked about where the families have committed?
Well, if you haven't committed, I'm assuming maybe you have a range of options. Is that what we're thinking about? You've got other colleges you're looking at, or are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, especially in this day and age with the current pandemic, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But
Yeah.
sometimes families, and I've run into this where they're a little bit more hesitant now because maybe the parents lost the job, or they got reduced hours, or they're fearful that they might lose their job, right? But maybe haven't yet. So the
Yeah.
families that maybe haven't committed, are there any differences there in terms of what they should look for?
Well, if you haven't committed, then one thing you want to look into is that financial aid package final? Now, sometimes you're going to hear from the financial aid office that, yes, absolutely, this award package is final. We do not negotiate. There is no appeal process. that's pretty rare. Just about every financial aid office will at least let you know they have an appeal process. As to how many appeals they're actually going to approve, that's really going to depend on oftentimes how much what their financial aid budget is and how many appeals they really can realistically approve. But as you mentioned, with the pandemic going on, there's going to be a lot of situations where families will want to appeal, and I think many colleges are preparing for that and are probably going to approve a lot of these appeals more so than they have in the past. So we'll get into appeals in a little bit, but so that's really the first thing, is you want to find out, is this financial aid package definitive? Is there any way is there any flexibility there? And so there's different ways to go about that. Sometimes it's with sort of a leveraging, I have this offer from another college, and that's called sort of a match request appeal, which we can talk about in a little bit. Or there's just the standard appeal that's based on a change in financial circumstances. So that's usually a job loss, a reduction in hours from a job, or some unexpected high cost, maybe medical expenses, or it could even go to one-time income. Sometimes you receive a lump sum unexpected, and that's not going to be usual. It's an atypical year. So you're saying, okay, you're looking at 2 years back when I got this inheritance, but every other year my income is much lower. So that's another type of appeal that some colleges, not all, will look at and make an adjustment for. So you first want to figure out, is the financial aid package and what you're going to owe after it, your net cost, is that something that's realistic for you? Can your family afford that? I mean, you have to be honest with yourself and say, is this really something that I can do? And if it's not, it really is worth having a conversation with the financial aid office and letting them know that. Because maybe there's something that they can tell you, or that something that comes out in the conversation that you're not aware of, that maybe they find a solution. Oftentimes that depends on how helpful the person is you're talking to. Hopefully you get a really great financial aid officer, and he or she gives you, some good information. But usually there are solutions. Maybe they're not great solutions, but there's usually options, I should say. And that's what the financial aid office can tell you. Okay, this is what you can consider. This is how you might be able to make this work, whether it's payment plans, various financing options. So there are ways to do it, some more palatable than others, but you really just want to figure out, is this something that you can do? And not just for 1 year, for all 4 years and maybe more.
Right. And so we'll talk about appeals in just a moment, but before we get there, because I know everybody wants to ask, right? Because that's sort of the quintessential question about, can I ask for more money? Can I leverage another school's offer against this other school and things like that? But just so everybody's on the same page, give us just a quick overview of the timeline of sort of when families can expect bills and when payments might be due for that fall semester, things like that. I know it varies a little bit by school, but just as a broad overview, just so everybody has a clear expectation of that.
Okay, so I'm most familiar with the fall spring semester, kind of the typical academic calendar. So what's happening right now is we're about 2 weeks shy of May 1, which is usually that's the enrollment deposit date. That's when you have to decide if you're going to attend college, and you're going to make that deposit and commit to the college. So after you do that, you decide on the college, then you've got a few months of kind of getting inundated with all kinds of emails from all the different, different areas on campus. They can tell you about housing, about dining, about every special programs. You're going to get a lot of information, right? The bill will come out to you. It'll probably be, usually the first one is mailed, but everything is now electronic. So you're probably going to get most of this via email. So just be aware of that. That's going to come out probably in late July, and they give you about a month, and usually it's due the first month, about a month prior to the start of classes. So if classes begin in September, you're probably going to have that bill due around the first week or so of August. So then that's if you're billed twice, which is kind of standard. You billed once in the fall, and in the second half you're billed for the spring semester. So usually you're going to get a bill in December, around December, and that's probably going to be due in January, about a month before. Most spring classes will start up in February. A lot of colleges will have some kind of spring session. They call it different things during the month of January. That may or may not be part of the academic calendar. That really kind of varies from college to college, but that's more specific to your specific institution.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So bills are coming soon. All right, so let's talk about appeals, right? And so really you kind of outlined two different types. So one is really that match offer where, hey, I got accepted at school A, but school B also gave me an offer. And then later on, we'll talk about the change in circumstances. But let's talk about that match offer one first, right? And you go on the internet. There's all these articles about yes, you should appeal on that basis. No, you shouldn't appeal on the basis. What's the truth, and what tips do you have, Peter?
Well, the truth is it never hurts. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make a college unaccept you. I mean, not at least not in terms of appeals, and so don't think that you're going to make them feel like the financial aid office might take money away. They're never going to do that. They're not going to be less likely to help you in the future if you submit an appeal that they think is inappropriate in some way. Know that this is a kind of game that is played out among all colleges. And I say it's a game. I mean, it's a very serious game. These are high stakes. It's a lot of money. And price is negotiable to an extent and to varying degrees from college to college. Now, the highest priced colleges now are around $70,000 to $80,000 for the private colleges, full cost of attendance. Now, obviously, a lot of that is going to be discounted through some form of scholarship or grants. So that's not what every student is paying on average. So, if a family is able to pay that, then the college will want them to pay. But they fully expect colleges that they are going to be discounting tuition in various ways, and it comes down to their policies. So when it comes to match request is kind of an internal term. I mean, basically it's saying I got an offer from another college. It's a better offer. They're giving me more money, or for whatever reason I'm paying less money out of pocket for this college than I am for this college. So it never hurts to say that and to let them know, hey, I really like both of these colleges. You're my first choice. I really want to go here, but price is a consideration here. It's a part of my decision-making process. And any college respects that and understands that. Now, I would recommend before you just submit a letter to them or an award letter or award letters, I wouldn't just send them to them and just say, hey, look at this, tell me if you can beat it. I mean, that's a little bit crude. You can do that. And like I said, it's not going to cause them not to look at it. But they're more likely to spend more time on it, I should say, and give it its full value if you also submit a letter and explain why you're appealing. So it's not just that, hey, beat this offer. I mean, that's ultimately what you're asking for, but be a little more diplomatic about it. Explain why you cannot afford the price that they're setting for you, why that's going to be a financial obstacle for you. And the more information you can give, it gives them a little bit more to work with. And the other reason it's important is, well, for one thing, it also depends on, is this a competitor? Is this a college that they don't want to lose your son or daughter to? So if you're applying to an elite college and you're saying, well, we got into the public state college, which really isn't in the same league, or it's not a direct competitor, I should say, then I probably wouldn't bother doing that. I mean, you kind of have to know if this is a college that the college or university you're appealing to really cares about. So I would ask. I mean, it really doesn't hurt to just ask. And it matters who you ask. So sometimes it's hard to get to the right person because there are, kind of layers of who you might talk to when you just call. You might get a call center for a very large college. You might get a sort of frontline staff that really doesn't understand how these processes work. So you really want to connect to a financial aid officer who is actually reviewing the appeals, or at least understands how the process works. You're not always going to know that, but that's what you want to aim for. So if you just send a general email to a general financial aid inbox, you're probably not going to have that responded to by the person you want to hear from. So if you have an assigned financial aid advisor, many colleges will do that, try to get that person's contact information, make direct contact. Send an email specifically to that person. don't go to the director. That is frowned on, unless it's a really serious issue. That's really not going to help you very much. It's not going to hurt you, but it's not going to help you. You want to find out who the right person is to get the information from, and that's usually sort of a core group of financial aid processors, reviewers, whatever you want to call them. These are the people that are making the decision, that are actually reviewing the appeals and making those determinations. So you want to understand what their thought process is about this. Are you wasting your time by sending in a letter from a college that they're really not going to match with? Or they may just tell you bluntly, don't bother sending any letters, because we just don't do that here. It says you can appeal, you can tell us what your colleges are, but don't bother sending us documentation because we have a policy, we don't do it. It just really varies from college to college. So while I say it's never a bad thing to do it, you don't want to waste your time if it's clearly not going to get you anywhere. So do a little research. Try to talk to people that can give you meaningful information. Hope that's helpful.
Okay, absolutely. And just very, very, very quickly, just on the merit aid side of things, the scholarship things, is the best route to go through financial aid, or is the best route actually to go through admissions for merit aid, right? Because you handle, I mean, because
Right.
there's merit aid and need-based aid. What would you say?
Right. So that's usually admissions. Now, financial aid sometimes will be kind of the main office that wants to review that, and it may actually be determined by financial aid. They may be the ones processing it, but admissions is setting the criteria, right? Because they're the ones that are doing the enrollment management. They're the ones that are trying to get the class they want to, and I guarantee you it's the person in charge of admissions that's deciding how much merit they want to give out and how they want to allocate it. So sometimes financial aid and admissions work very closely together. Other times they're very distinct, and there's kind of a firewall between the two. But whatever the case, it's a pretty safe bet to say that admissions is handling merit scholarship anytime. Well, they're the ones probably setting it, and they're also probably the ones involved in appeals. So it really just depends on how the office structure works. Again, I'm kind of speaking generally. So it doesn't hurt to go to financial aid, but it's probably going to be an admissions issue if you're talking about matched scholarships.
Okay, awesome, awesome. But like you said, it doesn't hurt. And I would imagine
No.
that if you ask financial aid, they might just simply redirect you to admissions for that part of it.
Yeah, if you're just saying, can you reevaluate my merit scholarship? So that's a little bit different. I guess it's a little bit different than saying, here, I got this match award letter from this other school. It kind of depends on if it's a need-based package or if it's another merit scholarship. If it's another merit scholarship, admissions is probably going to be looking at it. If it's a need-based package, so then it gets kind of to the need analysis. How did we determine what your family contribution was? That gets to financial aid, because then they're trying to say, okay, what is this school doing that we're not doing that maybe we could be doing?
Right, right. Okay, so that was really good. So let's turn to sort of more of a current events type of situation. So, of course, in the current pandemic, as we talked about before, parents have lost their jobs or reduced hours, or they're worried about losing their jobs, or they had all this money saved up for their son or daughter in a 529 plan, and it disappeared in a blink because the market went down, right? So these are really more like change of circumstances, especially sort of like the job loss thing. What are some tips around that if you're going to appeal on that basis?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big topic. There's so I'm trying to think where to dive in on that. I think the most typical appeal that I've seen, and most financial aid offices will see, has to do with losing a job, or there being some significant financial change from the financial documents that you submitted. So for this year, the 2020-2021 year, it's based on the 2018 tax return. So if you had a new job at some point in 2019, or you lost a job in 2019, and you were either out of work for a while, or you took another job at a lower pay, that means your current reality is very different from what the financial aid application is based on. So that's a very standard reason why a family would appeal and say, okay, you looked at my income, it was $150,000, let's say, and now it's $100,000. So I'd like you to reevaluate my income based on what I'm making now. That's oftentimes something a college will be willing to do in most cases. So that's probably, the most general appeal I can think of. There are, right now, I think what we're going to be seeing, and this is a more complicated situation, is when you have a fairly recent change in financial circumstances. So it used to be prior to COVID-19 that if there was a recent job loss, a lot of financial aid offices would say, well, we're sorry this happened, but unfortunately we need to wait a period of time before we can allow you to appeal, because we need to have some time to pass to find out, okay, did you get a new job? What kind of severance did you get? What sort of unemployment benefits are you getting? We want to know if it's an extended period of unemployment, or did you bounce right back and this is a small blip and your income really didn't change that much. So there's different reasons colleges will have those kinds of policies. But now, that's not really, we don't know what the future holds right now. I mean, we are in a time of great uncertainty. And so there is more of an attitude that we're willing to make changes based on recent changes in financial circumstances that are related to this current financial crisis that we're all in. And so that means that instead of looking at 2018 as the base year, or even 2019, where we would be able to have financial data from, now we're talking about a year that's still not even halfway through. And so we don't know what's going to happen through the rest of the year. So if we're going to base, we call this a projected year appeal. 2020 is the projected year. So some colleges will allow families to estimate what they have earned to date, their earnings up to this point in time, and then their best estimate of what they think they may earn for the rest of the year. And sometimes that's very difficult and challenging, especially if it's maybe a business. Your revenue is down. You don't really know when things are going to change. So it's a guessing game. It used to be colleges would say, well, you have a business income fluctuates. It's going to catch up with you. We'll get it next year. We can't really say that anymore. At least not, it's hard to say that with a straight face, right? Because it's, we recognize that families are feeling the pain right now. And also they have to make a decision. They have to make a decision in a couple of weeks. So if we want to yield this student, and we feel that if we can't, get that price to a level that, is reasonable to this family, then, it's a decision we have to make. So I think many colleges are more likely to approve those kinds of appeals now than they used to.
Right, but the key, as you said earlier, is it never hurts to ask, right? So
no, it doesn't.
You might get a no, but go ahead and ask anyway.
There are so many situations where I come across, accounts, or I'll talk to families about something that I'm noticing on an account, and they tell me about something that happened, 2 years ago, or, long enough where it was something we should have addressed in prior years, but they didn't ask. They never said anything about it. And it's too late at that point to do anything. So yes, if there's ever something that you think you should ask, because you don't want to miss an opportunity.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. It's great tips, Peter, for sharing for everyone. I always love talking to you about this stuff, because we kind of see sort of, the opposite sides of that same coin, right? You're sort of on the institutional side and I'm on the client side. So we're basically out of time, folks, but if anybody has any questions, please use that chat button, which you can find at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer, or if you touch your screen on a mobile device, there should be something icon that pops up. So Peter, we do have a quick question here. So in light of COVID-19, if the school decides that the first semester will be remote learning, right, which I know is a distinct possibility, would it be fair to request a lower tuition? Is it reasonable to expect no room and board fees? That's an interesting question that
it's
a lot of people are wrestling with.
Yes, it has been. It's an issue that is being debated in colleges fiercely right now. And so it's hard to say. I mean, I can tell you where I work, Johns Hopkins, we are in the process of making that decision. And I think they're going to decide fairly soon. And I think Harvard has even said something recently that there is looking very likely like that they may actually have remote learning going into the fall semester. So my guess is it is more likely than not that many colleges, if not all, are going to be doing online learning for this fall semester. I would be surprised if that's not the case. I know, it's not what we want, and it creates so many problems, but I think that's very likely a reality that we're going to be looking at. So can you request tuition to be reduced? You could, but I don't think you're going to get anywhere with that. I mean, tuition is going to be set early on, and that's not going to change. What you can do is you can work on the financial aid aspect. You can say, you can try to negotiate the financial aid, which discounts the tuition. So, that you can do. And there are, petitions with students that are asking for this, even for this past semester, saying, hey, we lost half the semester having to be online. We lost all these resources that we had. What are you going to do about that? And, letters to the president. And I mean, this is a very intense issue. So room and board, it's a great question. If you're not going to be able to go to the dorms, how could we possibly charge you for housing? And I don't think we could. I say we, collectively for colleges. So I think very likely if that happens, you're going to be having a cheaper overall cost of attendance if the students have to live at home and take the online courses. Now that may also impact your thinking on where you want to send your child to school, or where the student decides to go. I mean, I'm hoping this is just this is for a little while. We all hope that, right? But we don't know, and what we may find, this is yet to be determined. But with all these schools that are going online, lessons are going to be learned, and they're going to find out, hey, we can do a lot of this stuff so much more cheaply. And I mean, we may see a revolution in higher education from this. I mean, there's so much online learning already, but now that so many colleges are being forced to do it, I don't know what's going to come about from that. I mean, it's really, we're going to see. I think there's a lot of changes coming, and they're going to happen pretty fast.
Right. No, that's a great question. I know that you and I have discussed the likelihood of that happening. I mean, it changes. It's a game changer type of situation.
Yeah.
All right. So, folks, we are actually a little bit over time. I want to say thank you to everyone who is on the call. I definitely appreciate it. Actually, one last question, and we do need to wrap up. Given the disruption, do you think schools would be willing to accept a deferral? So I'm assuming sort of defer your admissions decision, right? Or defer your acceptance, I should say.
Yeah. I think the answer is yes. And they probably would be more inclined to do that now, maybe than other times. So, I think you want to make a strong case for it. So if you decide that that's what you want to do, I wouldn't just say it's because I don't want to have a semester of online learning. I mean, that can be a part of it, but everyone's going to be dealing with that, right? So if you really do want to defer for a year or a semester, I would recommend making a stronger case that's not just related to what's affecting everybody, but something that's personal to the student. This is what the student wants to do, before attending college, because that's really the main reason deferrals are granted. It's the student has some opportunity, something that he or she really wants to do to delay attending. So that's how I would suggest approaching that.
Awesome, great. Okay, everyone, so that's all the time we have. This is the first in our Webinar Wednesday series. So each week we'll be addressing a different topic, whether it's college or retirement or student debt or some other thing. I'm doing this to try and help more people get information out. And so various weeks I'm going to have a different guest speaker. I know Peter's going to be back. Many thanks to Peter Wyatt, Senior Associate Director of Student Financial Services at Johns Hopkins. And so I can't say thank you enough, Peter, for the time. So everyone, hope you have a great night. Stay safe. And please sign up and keep an eye out to sign up for next week's session. All right, everyone? Thanks so much.
Thank you.